Minister Keekar stood before the assembly on Planet Qazar, concluding his detailed presentation on the inhabitants of a distant planet. "And that concludes my presentation," he said, "on why I feel the inhabitants would be an excellent addition to our empire's culture." The chairman nodded curtly. "Thank you, Minister Keekar." As Keekar prepared to step down, he noticed the chairman's unsettled expression. Something seemed to be bothering him. Ignoring the chairman's dismissal, Keekar turned back to the assembly. "Are there any questions?" he asked, hoping to clarify any doubts or concerns. The chairman, seemingly eager to end the session, began, "Minister Keekar, your allotted time is." A voice from the assembly interrupted, "Could you tell us more about their mode of transportation?" The chairman sighed, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to Keekar, awaiting his response. "Cars?" Keekar asked, slightly taken aback. "I'm not sure what's so interest." "Please," the chairman interjected, rubbing his temples, "just answer the question so we can move on." Keekar nodded, gathering his thoughts. Cars are the primary mode of transportation for the inhabitants. These vehicles are essentially metal constructs on wheels, moving under their own power along the ground. A murmur of disbelief rippled through the assembly. One minister, looking puzzled, asked, "So they are attached to the ground, and the wheels serve as a buffer between the terrain and the passenger cabin?" Keekar shook his head. "No, they move freely on the wheels. The wheels rotate, propelling the car forward or backward, depending on the operator's control." Another minister, intrigued, pressed further. "They can move in any direction?" "Correct," Keekar confirmed. "They are not confined to rails but can navigate in any direction the driver chooses." The chairman leaned forward, his interest piqued. "Surely such a design would be impractical on a planet with varied terrain like HQZ5? Keekar smiled, anticipating the question. "Indeed, the inhabitants construct flat roadways that traverse their landscape. These roads are built over, through, and sometimes under the terrain to provide a smooth surface for the cars. But achieving such speeds on these roads must be dangerous," the chairman observed, skepticism evident in his voice. Keekar paused, realizing the assembly's incredulity. "The speeds are comparable to our rail systems. However, they do pose significant risks." Another round of murmurs filled the room. One minister stood up, visibly agitated. "I refuse to believe any intelligent species would choose such a dangerous form of transport. Surely these cars are used only by the outcasts of their society or as a form of punishment." Keekar bristled at the assumption. "On the contrary, cars are prevalent among the wealthier classes. There's a cultural obsession with owning powerful, fast, and aesthetically pleasing cars. It is even a significant rite of passage for young members of their society to acquire their first car." The assembly fell silent, processing this information. One minister, a former scientist, spoke up, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How are these vehicles powered?" "Rail is the most efficient transport system we have, moving large numbers of passengers with minimal energy." Keekar sighed, knowing this would only fuel more disbelief. "They use a liquid fuel called gasoline, derived from oil, which is formed from ancient organic matter subjected to heat and pressure over millions of years. They extract this substance and use it to power an internal combustion engine." The scientist's eyes widened in shock. "Combustion engine? You mean they use controlled explosions to move their vehicles?" "Yes," Keekar confirmed, bracing for the reaction. "The engine ignites the gasoline, causing a controlled explosion that moves pistons, generating the power to propel the vehicle." The scientist stood abruptly, his face red with anger. "Do you take us for fools? The energy density of such a fuel is immense. I cannot believe a species would use it in such a reckless manner." The assembly erupted in exasperated groans and muttering. Keekar raised his voice to be heard over the din. "They also have machines that fly, similar to our genyups." The hall fell silent again, a collective disbelief hanging in the air. Keekar continued, everything I have presented is factual. As a scientist, you must be aware of the dangers of assuming expertise outside your field. I suggest you consider the evidence before dismissing it. The scientist, still fuming, stormed out of the assembly hall. The chairman, visibly struggling to maintain order, leaned forward. Are these cars not dangerous? Yes, Keekar admitted. Accidents involving cars are a leading cause of death. Many drivers operate their vehicles while distracted by their mobile computers or other activities. A concerned minister spoke up. Surely they have not discovered rail transport. That must explain their reliance on these hazardous vehicles. Keekar shook his head. They have an extensive rail network. However, since the invention of cars, rail transport has been largely relegated to freight. The assembly erupted into chaos. Ministers shouted over each other, some calling for intervention, others accusing Keekar of fabricating stories. The chairman banged his gavel repeatedly, struggling to restore order. You expect us to believe, one minister's voice boomed over the commotion, that they drive these dangerous vehicles by choice, despite knowing the risks, and have abandoned rail transport. Keekar nodded, feeling the weight of the assembly's disbelief. Yes, that is precisely what I am saying. Another minister, still skeptical, asked, what happened to their rail infrastructure? Did they dismantle it? No, Keekar replied, it is now primarily used for freight transportation. The assembly descended into uproar once more. Some ministers called for a re-evaluation of their stance on the planet's inhabitants, while others remained adamant that Keekar was mistaken or misleading them. As the chairman continued to struggle for order, Keekar glanced around the hall. The reactions ranged from outrage to curiosity, disbelief to concern. He realized that his presentation had stirred a deeper conversation about the cultural and technological diversity of the universe. In the midst of the chaos, Keekar thought to himself, I should definitely avoid mentioning motorcycles. As the assembly hall gradually quieted, the chairman leaned forward, his voice stern. Minister Keekar, we appreciate your detailed account. However, the information you have presented is unconventional, to say the least. It challenges our understanding of efficient and safe transportation. Keekar nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. I am aware that these practices may seem alien to us. However, they are a reflection of the unique cultural and technological evolution of the inhabitants of this planet. A minister with a scholarly demeanor stood up. Minister Keekar, can you provide any insight into the rationale behind this seemingly reckless use of energy and technology? Why would a species with access to more efficient forms of transportation choose such a perilous alternative? Keekar took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. The inhabitants place a significant cultural value on individual freedom and mobility. Cars, as a mode of transportation, offer a level of personal autonomy that rail systems do not. There is also a strong cultural association between cars and status, with certain vehicles symbolizing wealth, success, and independence. The scholarly minister nodded thoughtfully. So, this is not merely a matter of practicality but also a reflection of societal values and status. Precisely, Keekar agreed. Moreover, the development of extensive road networks has been a monumental achievement in their engineering and construction capabilities. It has allowed for widespread connectivity and has become an integral part of their economy and daily life. The chairman interjected, his voice filled with curiosity. But surely, the environmental and safety concerns must outweigh these benefits? How do they address the negative impacts of this mode of transportation? Keekar hesitated, knowing this would be another contentious point. There are significant challenges, indeed. The environmental impact of cars, particularly those powered by gasoline, is a major concern. Air pollution, greenhouse gas emissions, and resource depletion are all pressing issues. Additionally, traffic accidents are a leading cause of injury and death. The assembly murmured in response, a mix of concern and disbelief. One minister, a known environmental advocate, stood up. Minister Keekar, are you suggesting that this society is willing to sacrifice the well-being of their planet and people for the sake of personal convenience and status? Keekar met the minister's gaze, his expression serious. Unfortunately, yes. However, it is worth noting that there is a growing movement within their society advocating for more sustainable and safer alternatives. Efforts to transition to electric vehicles, improve public transportation, and implement stricter safety regulations are gaining traction. The environmental minister nodded, visibly relieved. That is somewhat reassuring. It seems that, despite their current practices, there is potential for positive change. Another minister, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Minister Keekar, you mentioned earlier that they also possess flying machines. Can you elaborate on their aviation technology and its use within their society? Keekar nodded, grateful for the shift in topic. Indeed, they have developed a wide range of aircraft, from small private planes to large commercial airliners. These machines are used for various purposes, including transportation, cargo delivery, and military applications. Aviation is a significant industry on their planet, facilitating long-distance travel and global connectivity. The minister raised an eyebrow. And what powers these machines? Surely they do not rely on the same combustion technology as their ground vehicles. Keekar shook his head. Most aircraft are powered by jet engines, which use a refined form of gasoline known as jet fuel. These engines operate on a similar principle to combustion engines but are optimized for high-speed travel and lift. Helicopters, a significant part of their aviation sector, operate using rotors that provide vertical lift and maneuverability. This makes them ideal for urban transport, search and rescue missions, and other specialized tasks. The chairman, intrigued, leaned forward. And what about the environmental impact of their aviation industry? Surely it must be significant, given the scale of their operations. Keekar nodded gravely. Indeed, the aviation industry is a major contributor to air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions. The use of jet fuel releases a substantial amount of carbon dioxide and other pollutants into the atmosphere. However, like with their ground transportation, there are efforts to mitigate these impacts through the development of more fuel-efficient aircraft and the exploration of alternative energy sources. A minister, who had been quiet until now, spoke up with a note of concern. Minister Keekar, you've provided a comprehensive overview of their technological capabilities and cultural practices. However, I can't help but wonder about the overall stability of this society. Given the risks and environmental concerns associated with their transportation systems, how sustainable is their current way of life? Keekar considered the question carefully. The society in question faces significant challenges, particularly concerning environmental sustainability and public safety. However, there is a growing awareness of these issues, and steps are being taken to address them. The transition to more sustainable practices, such as the adoption of electric vehicles and the implementation of stricter safety regulations, is gradually gaining momentum. Additionally, there are efforts to improve public transportation infrastructure and promote more environmentally friendly modes of travel. The chairman leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. It seems that, while there are certainly concerns, there is also potential for positive change and development within this society. Minister Keekar, do you believe that integrating these inhabitants into our empire would be beneficial, given their current state? Keekar took a deep breath, weighing his response. I believe that there is much we can learn from their technological innovations and cultural diversity. Their unique approach to transportation and the challenges they face could provide valuable insights into our own society's development. Moreover, our empire's resources and expertise could assist them in transitioning to more sustainable and safe practices. The chairman nodded thoughtfully. Indeed. This decision will require careful consideration. Thank you, Minister Keekar, for your detailed and enlightening presentation. As the assembly began to disperse, ministers continued to discuss the day's revelations. Keekar watched as the room buzzed with renewed energy and debate, knowing that the conversation about the inhabitants and their place in the universe had only just begun. Keekar's presentation had ignited a firestorm of debate, forcing the assembly to confront the complexities and contradictions of the inhabitants' society. As he left the hall, Keekar felt a mix of emotions: pride in having sparked such a vital conversation and uncertainty about the future.